Hello and welcome to Since I've Been Down, post-film conversation. This conversation is a special program of CIFF Streams and Anisfield-Wolf Book Awards as part of Cleveland Book Week, presented by the Cleveland Foundation. My name is Eric Siler, and I'm a film, media arts, and communications professor from Cleveland State University, as well as moderator for this program. I am joined by two incredible individuals. One you will recognize right away, and the other is the director, writer, executive producer of this documentary, Since I've Been Down. It's Gilda Sheppard. Hello, Gilda, and welcome to our conversation.
Oh, it's my pleasure, and thank you so much, Eric, and also Cleveland Film Festival and Anisfield-Wolf. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. And the next person we have joining us is Tonya Wilson. Tonya is a re-entry outreach coordinator for the Freedom Project in Tacoma, Washington. And she was also a subject in the film Since I've Been Down, and you probably recognize her. Hello, Tonya, and welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me, Eric, and welcome everyone out there. It's a real pleasure and honor to be a part of this film festival and this interview.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, let's just get right into this. This was an extraordinary piece of work, Gilda. You pulled it together in a really artistic and an informative way. Can you take us back to when you first came up with this idea, and how did you come up with this idea, and how did it actually formulate into this documentary?
Wow. I've been working on this film for over 12 years, if you can imagine that. But that's a gift because I got to know people in the prison and their friends and peers outside. It actually started, I was doing this ethnographic film in Ghana, West Africa, in a refugee camp. And at the end of my filming there, one of the main women in the camp said, you know, Sis Gilda, the same AK-47s that you see on the streets of the Civil War in Liberia are on your streets. You need to do something about that. And so I had met all these child soldiers and all that. And so I came back. I found myself, after a while, teaching courses at Washington State Prison. And then one theory that I always talk about in sociology with sociology class, it was sociological imagination was the perspective. And that is the ability to see who you are and how policies affect your biography. So usually I always talk about that. But when I brought that to the classroom, it sparked a conversation like I had never seen. The theory, the perspective came alive. I heard origin stories. I heard stories about drive-by shootings, picnics, family reunions, courtrooms, classrooms, so many things. Being raised by a single parent, loving their mother, their father, all these beautiful love stories. Being suspended from school when you're very young, going to prison when you were 13, joining a gang when you were 11, being frightened in a car, driving around with the AK-47, and how policies, gentrification and all those other things, impacted some of their decisions. So this became more, I said, I have to bring a camera in to this because I was realizing that this is new information. This became more than statistics. These were the stories behind statistics. And so I needed people to hear what I was hearing and understanding even more. And so it revealed a culture of punishment. And it also told a narrative that's big, that's not just one city, Tacoma, Washington. It's a master narrative that is in most cities. So I thought that the folks who are in prison understand and have an answer. And if we could intervene early, we could have some of the best folks out here. And so with that spark in the classroom, I was able to bring a camera in after I asked their permission first, right? Then I went to the women's prison and the same thing happened. I remember, first I thought I'm gonna go to the Department of Corrections. Then I thought, I had to go to the subject, right? And that's why I reconnected with Tonya Wilson and met Kamonte Carter.
Well, wow. Very, very powerful. I applaud you for having the courage to do that and also to bring these stories out. And Tonya, Gilda came into your prison with the camera. Can you tell us your reaction, response to Gilda? Or were you open to talking to her? Or were you just thinking, oh no, this is just another person that just wants to have pity on prisoners? What was your initial reaction?
My initial reaction was surprise, because I don't know if it has come across in the film, but Gilda was my professor prior to my prison sentence. I was a student for 2 or 3 quarters at the Evergreen State College in Tacoma, on the hilltop, right in the thick of things. And, you know, our paths diverged. Mine led me to prison. And then just so happens that hers led her to prison. She was a keynote speaker for a program that was about positive change. And so when I seen her, I'm like, oh my God. And she was like, oh my God, I have been looking for you. I was looking for this young woman. And what brought you here?
So did you remember each other?
Oh yeah. She was the brightest person in the class, right? She's brilliant. I'm sorry, Tonya, go ahead. I'll never forget her.
And I was the youngest. I was 19 when I started in her program, and that program was tailored for working adults. And I don't know, the circumstances brought me into her classroom the first time. And, you know, as she looked around that room where she was the keynote speaker, she realized that some of the superintendents, some of the teachers, some of the counselors had been her previous students. And just so happens that one of the prisoners was as well.
Wow.
Interesting. Wow. So there was, I guess you felt kind of relieved in a way, and maybe was there a little bit of being embarrassed that, look, you were my teacher, I'm in this situation? What was your response from there?
Yeah, I wasn't embarrassed. I was just deeply affected. There was some shame involved because last time I seen her, I was walking out of her classroom. The next time I seen her, she was walking into the prison visiting room. And that she dispelled that really, really quickly. Like Dr. Sheppard, Gilda, my sweet teacher, my auntie, my momty, she dispelled that. She is a genuine person. And if she's, so there was no room for embarrassment. It was just pleasure and surprise, and her wanting to know. I mean, it was one of the first questions, this, baby, how did you end up here? And how long have you been here? And so those were the first questions that sparked that first sociology class.
Oh, interesting. Now, I'll get back to Gilda in a moment, but can you just speak a little bit about your time being incarcerated? How long were you incarcerated, and did you take advantage of any programs and opportunities while in prison?
Yeah, I was incarcerated for 17 years to the day on a 20-year sentence. And while I was there, eventually, yeah, after I like there's a period of adjustment where things don't seem real, where you are just trying to adapt, when you're trying to figure out what your place is in that community. And yeah, I took advantage of a lot of academic opportunities. And as you find your footing in prison, we started our own organization. It was called the Women's Village, and had a chance to affect change on a really, really significant scale there in terms of violence. Most people don't think a women's prison is violent, but it is.
But what you have to understand is that Tonya was the founding member of the Women's Village.
Oh, really?
I know we're going to talk about the Black Prisoners Caucus, but this was founded by the women who were incarcerated, cross race lines, cross crime lines as well. And it was one of the most violent prisons in Washington State. But once Tonya and her colleagues started the Women's Village, violence went down by 50%.
Wow.
So that's the power that her organizing, but also the ethics. They had all kinds of different departments in this Women's Village. It's not like, let's get together and talk. They had talked about how language affects violence. They talked about environmental safety and environmental studies. They talked about so many, parenting, tutoring, writing, and all kinds of things. That's what Tonya Wilson and her colleagues created.
That's interesting. And I know you're not surprised because you said she was one of your brighter students. So for you, Tonya, to start that, no, Gilda wasn't surprised at all.
No. And
well, good.
It's so funny, you know, Gilda, she downplays her role a lot, but she was our collaborator on the inside and outside. When she realized that this was a project that we were involved in, she made sure that, and in all ways that we could, that she could further our goals.
Well, that's wonderful. Gilda, this film, I kind of compare it to, like, you were exposing the viewers to a lot of different things. It's almost like you opened a book and you showed us a little bit about something, then you closed it, then you showed us something else. It could have taken off in so many different directions. I mean, you touched upon, Commante, of course, and the whole parole situation and prison for profits, regentrification, corruption amongst police, and so forth. There's so many different issues, and the Black Prisoners Caucus you could have gone into and just stayed with. How did you develop, come to a consensus on how to focus this film and not just go off on one particular topic?
Now that was difficult, right?
Really?
The entire narrative, right? However, because I believe in restorative justice, and I think taking one aspect of that would have been restorative justice. I want to deal with transformative justice, where you can look at many different variables that impact society, not only prison. Right? And so I wanted to look at policing. I wanted to ask the question, what is justice? I wanted to expose the culture of punishment, not just to only send someone to prison, but what it means to when a child has no alternative, I dare say, than to join a gang, and not blame the community for that. I wanted folks to see how we were conciliatory in all of that. So the first part of the film, before the men and women are incarcerated, before we get inside prison, particularly, I wanted folks to see not just the statistics, but the stories. And so because I'm into transformative justice, Okay. I'm not poo-pooing restorative justice. I wanted folks to see the multiple layers and how this is happening in Tacoma. But like I said earlier, that this is a story that's happening in many of our urban areas, right? And I dare say, our foreign policy, how we treat the world, you know? And it's like one of the characters, one of my subjects, one of my former students, Torre Zimbabwe, who's at Cleveland Bay Prison, he says, I dare say that some of the answers that society is seeking can be found in prison. So I had to create a really good scaffold for that.
Right, that was powerful. That was powerful. I'm glad you included that in there because people who are living this day in and day out have a lot of time to reflect. And Tonya, I know you know firsthand about time. You have a lot of time to think and reflect. And after 17 years, that's a good part of your youth and young adulthood. You had to come out. Can you just talk briefly about what kept your spirits up while you were in prison, and maybe some of the low points, high points and low points while you were in prison, knowing that you were going to be released one day?
Yeah, the low points started and came in fast. And 65 days after I got there, my mom passed away.
I'm sorry.
And thank you. And there is just nothing like that feeling of your mom not being on the earth. Like, it becomes a different place. I usually don't get disbelief, but even to this day, I don't know who committed the crime that I was in there for, that I got that 20 years for. So it was very surreal to find myself in a place where, admittedly, because of the choices that I'd made, I found myself there. But to be there for a crime that I didn't commit was horrific. Like, it was nightmarish. But I found some of the best people that I have ever met there. It wasn't about making a family. It was about finding people who had experienced as much pain or more, and just meeting on a wavelength where we are, where we're on equal footing. We've all been broken. We've all been in places of regret and neglect and impulsiveness, like all these things that make up a young life that ends up in prison. And friendships that I cherish and that I anticipate out here, friends that I've waited to release, and some that I know won't ever release. Heartbreakingly, my brother was murdered while I was there, 2012, and my father passed away in 2013. So definite low points. Lost a clemency bid in 2012. Definitely a low point. I felt like a sucker for even believing that was something that was a possibility for me as a young Black person. But knowing, because of those things, that I could use all of those things, and I have used all of those things to connect to other people, to use the way that I convey information and my experience in the world to let somebody else know that it is going to be okay, even if it's not all right now, and to be the model for somebody else that I didn't have for that I wasn't provided for myself. So some to my friend Shawanda told me that, and she would tell the women who we would be orientating, that sometimes you have to be the role model that you want to see happen for other people. And so, like there's a certain well of strength that comes up inside of you when you've been in prison. Like there's no way to survive it and not have this perverse kind of strength, like this strength in spite of or despite, you know, the surroundings and the treatment and the loneliness, you know. And
wow.
I got my associate's degree while I was there.
Oh, great.
Graduated valedictorian, and I was able to do a TED Talk while I was there. So they had a TEDx, and I was able to fully understand, as much as a person can fully understand in that situation, who I was, you know, who I could be and who I will always be. So.
Well, congratulations on, you know, pressing forward and advancing yourself with education, valedictorian. That's wonderful. So, and I know Gilda, you're not surprised at that at all, that she was valedictorian. But speaking about time in prison, Gilda, one person that's been in prison for quite some time is Kamanti, one of the subjects in the film we just saw. And are you still in touch with them? And if so, can you provide us with an update on Kamanti?
Yeah, I'm still in touch with him. Many of the people in prison call me Mama G. So I'm like that. And, in doing the film, you get to know their community, mother and sisters and brothers, uncles and aunties, former OGs. But Kamanti is, he's the one, he founded the TEACH program, Taking Education and Creating History, that goes across, just like the Village of Hope, goes across race lines and all of that. He has been in prison for 25 years. His attorney is very active, and now looking at the Senate Bill 6164, and that is how when prosecutors can go back and look at cases and reevaluate based on some of the things that a person has been doing. Because of Kamanti's work, and I dare say many of his peers, that now there's a Black Prisoners Caucus in 10 prisons, and including the women's prison. I think he still has hope that he will get out. The film was not made for Kamanti to get out. The film was made on the larger narrative, but to the extent that that could help, then we're fine with that, right? So that's what's going on. And, sometimes Kamanti will call into a conference where I show the film, on somebody's phone and be part of the talk. So I think it's like what Tonya was referring to. I think the kind of compassionate activism is what keep people hopeful. That's what Kamanti tells me, and that's what I've learned from folks. So right now, if Kamanti had committed this crime 61 days earlier, he would be out now. He would have served the 25 years. Or the way justice is and laws, if he had stepped out of the car and shot the individual, Corey, he would be out now. But because it came from a car. And the great remorse that Kamanti has for this crime is shown through grief, but it's also shown through the work that he is doing in the Black Prisoners Caucus and the phenomenal work he is doing when he established TEACH, and that is Taking Education and Creating History. So his remorse, even though he may not get out, I believe he will, is his activism, his compassionate activism.
Okay, so you feel that he is doing these programs because this is a part of who he is. This isn't just a stepping stone to try to help him get out.
Oh no. Oh no.
Exactly.
I mean, he started doing, no, this is not at all a partisan. He has been denied clemency. He never even thought about clemency. He had decided that this is it. But because he had great peers, you know, a guy named Dawood and many others who are in prison who fathered him. He was, as young folks say now, he became woke. And then he started reading education. He started reading philosophy. He started reading, you know, memoirs, Black history. And he understood that, I mean, he talks about it. He's riding around with a gun, trying to prove that you are somebody. You have to avoid reflection at all costs. So he's saving himself. And the mechanism for saving himself is to develop these programs. And now he's thinking about, why not be free?
Oh, good. That's a tremendous mental shift, you know, knowing that, you know, you're there for life and then trying to think about maybe I can be free. So yeah, that's just one. I just love the way you displayed his life. And speaking about being free, Tonya, take us to that day when you were actually released. What was that day like? I know in the film that you talked about how, wow, the Hilltop has changed, but take us back to that day.
So I was able to go into a work release program, and so I got transferred to another facility that was, you know, right in the heart of Tacoma, but not on Hilltop. And the first day, it was just about getting orientated. But when I was able to leave and I was able to go to the prospective job that I had that is actually housed in the very same building where we stood in front of as we were selling drugs and gangbanging and stuff. And now it's a Black-owned, Black-led organization that grows and gives away fruits and vegetables to anybody who wants them. They trade, and the trade is time, talent, or treasure. So whatever you can give back to somebody else in the community, that's the pay for what they get in terms of produce. And so I'm standing in front of this building where I had seen people die and where I had been my whole life. I've lived on Hilltop my whole life, and just looked around, and there was something different about the streets. Not just the people or, you know, lack of color of the people, but there was also, it took me a couple of weeks to realize it. And I told Gilda, I said, it looks different because the trees have grown. And so on these streets where there were saplings in front of people's homes, now there were this big, overarching, beautiful trees that gave all of these streets that I'd grown up on, that little boys and little girls that died on, they had this distinguished, quiet look to them that was like, the juxtaposition was poignant. You know, the juxtaposition between my memories and what I was seeing in front of me was just striking. And it struck my heart. It was striking.
Wow. I can only imagine how that was. I know people, I mean, you thought about this for 17 years. It's like, when I get out, the first thing I'm going to do is this. What was that? And did you do it?
The first thing, I probably said the first thing that I was going to do was smoke a cigarette. And I am nothing if not persistent. Yeah, I probably did smoke a cigarette. I just wanted to be, though. I wanted to be where you can look at, when you can be outside and know that you could take a step further and further and further and further without running into, you know, an electrified fence. I wanted to be able to be outside while the stars were out, not just look up at them while, you know, I wanted us to be in the same place. And there's just a sense of like spiritual autonomy when you know when you're not incarcerated anymore.
Amazing.
I didn't foresee the barriers that society puts around us anyway, though, for a couple more months.
Amazing. Let's shift back over to Gilda for a moment. I want to talk a little bit more specifics about the film itself, putting together. At points in the film, you used masks in the film, and you had different people appearing in masks, and there was this one scene where you had boys in masks and with capes on. Can you elaborate a little bit about the imagery you were trying to convey with the use of masks in this film?
Yeah, like I said, when I was in Ghana, West Africa, shooting this ethnographic film, some of the folks who were formerly child soldiers would bring some pictures of themselves with AKs and masks on and capes. They were kids, they were children. And they had to have this imagination that they were superheroes. They had to change the way they were thinking in order to do this violence,
right,
as if they were in a fantasy land, that it was something different, right? And then when I came and I really got into the, filming and meeting Kamanti and Tonya, I saw the youth in them. Kamanti joined the game when he was 11, right? I saw the fancifulness inside of them at the same time. Like Kamanti said, I had to avoid reflection at all costs. And so to do that, you had to do kind of like a masquerade. And so I wanted people to see at a certain punctuation in the film that these are children whose brain has not even formed, right? And because of some of the disparities, particularly with poor and Black children and brown children and immigrant children, but particularly the Blackest, I dare say, that this became this gang banging and all those kinds of things. Now, I'm not in it, but it became a fanciful thing, as if I'm a superhero. I remember one guy said, I thought I was fighting the enemy, but I was fighting the inner me. That was Marcus Alzheimer, Tonya, Andrea's nephew. And so I was able to see all of this, and I wanted folks in a metaphorical kind of aesthetic way to also see that they're children. And then there's this one dancing in the woods where the Bloods used to go and have fun, and it's the Lega mask, Lega mask, from the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And that mask, you wear it actually on your head, and it's a ritual that folks do to maintain good behavior, a spirit in the woods, those kinds of things. Then I saw, before that, I saw Charles Burnett's To Sleep with Anger. And there's this one scene with this little girl is in a kitchen and she has this mask on. And I thought, where does this come from? Why is this here? And it made me, and I remember always being haunted in a good way with that. And so I wanted to see how people hide themselves and at the same time their true self, and how it could be very childish, but also how it's also cultural. Now, I know not everybody saw all of that, but they saw children playing. And I wanted at a certain time for folks to do that. I dreamed of that scene.
Oh,
Yeah, I did. I dreamed of that scene. All these things are in my head.
Well,
I wanted
well,
folks to see what we do to children.
well, wonderful. I thank you for that director's insight on that and the explanation of the symbolism that you use there.
No,
Thank you.
can I just say just really quickly, you know,
Mm-hmm.
Gilda she saw us on those streets as kids, and she wasn't like, she saw something behind, like that mask also represents, she saw the children behind um those inmates. She saw the horror that existed for those children that she came in contact to as prisoners. Um, she saw
Wow.
children that weren't cared for,
Right.
and that have access to things that are destructive.
Right.
And so when she talks about why is it that the same AKs are in African countries and on the streets where African Americans are, like, why are those same guns there? They can have a war on drugs, but they've never had one on guns. They've never had a war on drugs. I mean, a war on guns, because the NRA makes sure that they don't. And so she saw the horror behind that, the reality of it.
Yeah, I applaud your vision, Gilda. I do for that. And Tonya, one thing that struck me in the film, you said, well, this is before when you were young and before you went to prison. You said that the life that you were leading, you got carried on a wave of circumstance, and that was just so powerful. And if there are any youth that are watching this today, what advice would you give to them if they're being carried on this wave? What can they do to prevent from ending up in a bad situation?
In order to see yourself as something different than the people, if you're in a bad situation and you want to something different, first of all, know that you're gonna be okay. Like, each one of these circumstances that creates this wave, that wave ends up crashing along the shore, and you can ride it to the shore safely. That's number one. Number two, you are whole and complete exactly how you are. And even though you feel neglected, you're angry, you're sad, you're confused, those feelings won't last long. But use them as impetus. Find somebody to act as an anchor, or act as an anchor for some other person, somebody younger than you, and just live out what you want to see, not what somebody else has prepared for you, because you have everything that you need to be exactly who you want to be. Find somebody. Find me. Find me. Find me. Find the me in your neighborhood, or find the Gilda in your neighborhood. If you can't, find me. Call me. Get in touch with Eric or Mallory or anybody that has anything to do with this project, and find me, and I will have my hand out to you. This is what my heart's motto is. If you come to me with bravery, I will meet you with my heart in my hand. I mean it. I mean it. That's what I would tell somebody.
Okay. Wow. Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you for extending that offer to our viewers. And I just want to reiterate that anyone who's watching this, Tonya sincerely means that, to find her or find someone like her that can assist. We're coming close to the end here. I know we can literally talk for hours about this, but this question is for the both of you. Excuse me. This is part of, as you know, this program is part of Cleveland Book Week, and I just have to ask you about books. Either one of you, are there any particular books that have helped you in your life, that's inspiring to you, either Gilda to make the film or Tonya to help deal with your just life in general?
Tonya, want to go first?
I have read, so I've always been a reader since first grade, since I learned how to read. I really, really love The Fire the Next Time, and how no nonsense and unapologetic James Baldwin was, but also in that unapologetic envisioning, he also did it in love. Like, he did it in love for his nephew, but he also did it in love for the people who don't love us, you know? Like, you cannot expect for something to change if you're doing the same thing that the people who you want to stop doing it to. You can't be the same as the people with whom you want to change. And so like Audre Lorde said, you cannot dismantle that master's house with his own tools. And so if we know that things are happening in terms of our annihilation, then we have to do things in terms of our love. It's one of the special things about us as a people. I like Claudia Rankine's Citizen. And I love those little, they're not vignettes, that lyric and the refrain that goes through it, that, you know, we are touched by the mundane and the extra mundane every day. And if we can just see that refrain through our days, that violence that is so passive, that's so subtle, then we can counteract it. It's so, I just think once you can see something, you have a choice to do something about it. And so I think about James Baldwin, I think about Claudia Rankine, I think about Toni Morrison. And I think that anything that resonates in the souls of people, no matter what color they are, then there's a way to emulate them in your everyday life. And so, yeah, I like them. I also like Madeleine L'Engle. I like the Imaginary too.
Great. A rich collection of authors and books you mentioned. Thank you for that. And what about you, Gilda?
Well, my God. I mean, let the scholars speak. You know what I mean? Oh, Tonya. You know, of course, James Baldwin. You know, I agree with Tonya about how he is, as folks say now, unapologetic, and at the same time always has this door open. And there's one quote that James Baldwin says, the role of an artist is like a lover. If I love you, I have to show you things you refuse to see. And that's what I go on. Everything that James Baldwin writes, you know, and all the documentaries about him. I also, The Golden Gulag by Ruth Wilson Gilmore, you know, talks about California and transformative justice. There was a book, The Culture of Punishment by Michelle Brown, that I particularly like. And everything that Bell Hooks writes. Bell Hooks had opened my eyes to being a feminist, to especially when she talks about choosing the margin as a place of radical possibilities, not as a place of deprecation and, oh, woe is me, slow fade in the gore, oh, the culture of poverty. No. She says, choose it. It's a perspective, you know, and that's what I go on.
Oh man, wow. That's what Freedom Project does.
Oh, okay. I love it.
Great. Well, this has been a great conversation. I know we are out of time, but since I'm moderating this, I'm just going to extend it just for another minute or so. And I just have one more question for each of you. I'll start with you, Gilda. Can you just tell us how this film was received and what's next for you? If you can briefly tell us that.
Well, it was received really very well, you know. People who like it, love it. You know what I mean? Particularly in the community, right? And there was one screening I had at Evergreen State College, a community screening, and one of the former OGs brought a guy who had just got, young man who had just gotten out of prison, and he saw folks on the screen who were legendary Crips or Bloods, and he said, "There's my homie," and the guy said, "Keep watching." And then this guy talked about how he thought not wanting to bang was being soft. He talked about, you know, why he did what he did and those kinds of things. And this young man, he had to put his head down. He was started to weep. So I want to use this film for, as James Baldwin says, showing people sometimes what they refuse to see. And I'm not just talking about the powers that be, but the power within our young people, our folks in marginalized communities. So I want to show it in prisons. I want to bring back parole, but not just bring it back so that it can still be the same disparities. I understand that we need to intervene in classrooms at lower, in the middle school, you know, all the way up. And, you know, I want to do that. I wanted to also do some, not only transformative justice, restorative justice. Some of the victims of the folks, you know, and of the people in the film, you know, I'm sure it's difficult because some of the scenes are kind of graphic. Mm. I wanted to be a healing space for them, you know, and we're going to develop a curriculum with the film as well, you know, so, you know, so community screenings, bringing back parole, doing all those social justice things that's happening, and having forums like this with my friend Tonya. What do you think about Tonya?
Great, great. Yes, I think Tonya is amazing. You are amazing as well, too, and I appreciate you bringing this film for us. I just want to close it out with Tonya and just ask you, what would you like people to know about you that may have not have come across in the film? We, you know, obviously see how intelligent you are, but what else do you want people to know about you?
I want you to know that, like I prepared a lot to get out of prison. I prepared based on what I seen my friends get out and struggle with. I prepared based on the healing that I had done there, and I still wasn't prepared. There's no way to prepare for the sense of isolation and mourning that you have when you get out of prison. And I didn't have a problem getting a job or reintegrating back into society, but my spirit did. And that is something that happens for every single person that gets out of prison. And so if you have a friend or a family member or an acquaintance that you know who has done time, just give them the space to be. The disenfranchisement is not just social, it is internal. And when you think of the social disenfranchisement, if you know that in your state, when you get out, somebody gets out of prison that they cannot vote, you vote in the name of somebody that you love. If you have ever known anybody who has been in prison and you know that they cannot vote, vote in the name of your love for them. That's what I would say.
Some strong words to take into consideration. Well, Tonya and Gilda, thank you so much for your time that you have given us today. It's just so much appreciated, and I wish you both the very, very best.
I love this woman.
Yeah, I love being on with time, you know, so thank you, Eric, and thank you, Erin.
Okay, great. Well, for more information about CIFF Streams and Anisfield-Wolf Book Awards, please visit clevelandfilms.org. I'm Eric Siler, and thank you for joining us.
Bye.